Hello there YouTube, I'm Father Dugan 8000 and welcome to another episode of Games That Time Forgot, a series where we look at cancelled games, prototypes, betas, concepts, and more. And today, we're going to talk about the most famous superhero in the world. No, okay, maybe I'm a bit off. Anyway, I meant Superman. Even though I personally don't think he's the world's greatest superhero, that will be Batman, I'm not afraid to admit that he's definitely one of the most influential characters in all of fiction. So, it's kind of strange that pretty much every single video game based on the Man of Steel are, at best, average and, at worst, utterly horrible. And the most infamous out of all of these has to be Superman 64, a game that is widely considered to be the nadir of terrible licensed games after, of course, E.T. for the Atari 2600. Even though I think the game is enjoyably awful, many consider it to be one of the worst tragedies to befall the glorious Nintendo 64. However, the thing is, it wasn't completely the fault of the game's developer, Titus, and they were even going to make amends to it with an improved PlayStation port that never came to be. What do I mean by all that? Well, let's jump into the development and cancelled PlayStation port of Superman 64. There's gameplay footage of a beta for this game roaming around the internet at the moment, and most of the people who've seen it have remarked that it looks much better than the final game. The infamous Kryptonite fog effect is nowhere to be seen in this version, the graphics have a much cleaner feel to them, and there weren't as many glitches such as getting stuck while flying as there were in the final product. Not to mention that the game's now notorious Rings and Metropolis missions were nowhere to be seen in the beta, which all hints that the beta could have been better than what we got. So what the hell happened exactly? Simple. Warner Brothers happened. Apparently they caused Titus massive amounts of trouble by putting in all sorts of nonsensical rules on what they could and couldn't do with the Superman character, such as having a limited supply to his powers and having to actually pick up power-ups in order to access said powers. In fact, according to an interview on Protojohn's blog with one of the people who worked on Superman 64, that employee stated, and I quote, "It is not even 10% of what we intended to do, but the licensor killed us. I am not allowed to detail what we had to remove, but it was a lot." And according to an article on Rareware Central, it seems that Titus were completely forced to remake the entire game a month before release. Yes, you heard me right. The reason Superman 64 came off as buggered as it did was because this new version was made a month before it came out. Good lord, no wonder things turned out the way they did. So, really, this whole thing wasn't the fault of Titus. Instead, Warner Bros. Is to blame for this for creating one of the most infamous video games in history, all because of tons and tons of utterly silly guidelines and restrictions that Titus were forced to abide by. Quite a shame, isn't it? I mean, it could have been a good game for all we know, but thanks to Warner Bros., we don't know. Instead, we didn't get that at all. However, Titus did get another chance to set things right. With what, exactly? The upcoming PlayStation port of the game. From what I understand, this new version was originally going to be a straight-up port of the original N64 game, but since the PlayStation couldn't handle the giant free-roaming Metropolis, it was decided to completely remake the game from the ground up. This new version would have become a linear 3D action-adventure game, similar to the likes of the core-designed Tomb Raider games, and even reminiscent of the 2000 Spider-Man game developed by Neversoft. The game would have concerned the trials and tribulations of the Man of Steel as he tried to save Metropolis, and perhaps the world, from Lex Luthor and his evil army of robots. In this version, Superman would have had unlimited access to his powers and would use them to solve puzzles and get past certain obstacles. There's also the fact that he would have been able to fly around in certain open areas and fight giant bosses. There's gameplay footage of this version roaming around on YouTube courtesy of the archive website PlayStation Museum, and it actually looks pretty decent, and the game was actually turning out well in terms of its development. In fact, it was 100% complete and was so close to being released that there were actually magazine ads for it alongside a cancelled Game Boy Color port, and you could even pre-order it. So what the hell happened? Simple. The license from Warner Bros. Ran out and Titus were forced to cancel the game since they'd be under tons of copyright trouble if they decided to release it. And so, after all the crap they went through, after being given the honor of creating the nadir of Nintendo 64 and licensed gaming, after trying their hardest to make a good Superman game worthy of the hero, Titus got completely screwed over and never got to release the Superman game they wanted to release on either the Nintendo 64 or the PlayStation, all because of Warner Bros. And their downright anal treatment of the developers. Despite what a lot of you think of Superman 64, you have to admit that it is a damn shame that Titus got the shortest straw in the history of licensed games and wound up creating the infamous game we know of today. It's hard not to feel sorry for these guys considering what they went through. Maybe one day when Warner Brothers calm the hell down, maybe then we'll get a good Superman game that even the Man of Steel himself will be proud of. Well, until that day comes, I'm going off to play Superman 64 and laugh my head off at the pure silliness of it all. I'm Father Dugan 9000, and I'll see you for my next video.